Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very accomplished and senior professional from Melbourne, Australia, Zora Artis. Zora, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Very, very happy to be here with you today.
Thank you. Zora is the founder of Artis Advisory. She's the co-founder of the Alignment People. She's Australia's leading alignment, communication, and brand strategist. So, Zora, before we start talking about alignment, communication, and brand strategy, tell me a little bit about your own journey and the work that you do at Artis.
Thank you. I have been in my work life for just over 30 plus years. I started off in the tourism industry, working in sales, marketing, and eventually in management. I worked for the State Tourism Authority, one of the state tourism authorities, the one that promotes New South Wales and Sydney. And I was a state manager for Victoria, where Melbourne is. And I did that for quite a number of years. Loved it. Loved sales, marketing. Loved managing people and managing business. And had an opportunity to step into a completely different role, which was in a branding agency. So it was a branding agency whose main client was Adidas in 15 countries through Asia Pacific. And my role was to expand the portfolio of clients and grow the business. So I stepped in and did that. I was with them for a number of years, worked on all sorts of different types of clients across industries and sectors and all that sort of thing. Loved doing that. And we were eventually bought out by an integrated marketing communication agency that had all the pieces of marketing and comms under one umbrella. So crisis communications, PR, strategy, digital, everything, and advertising, everything under the one banner. And once I was there, I became a group account director and then learned to be a strategic planner with the CEO. Loved working with him, learned all about, what we're here to do is about behavior change, doing something, helping people do something more, less for the first time, the last time, that sort of thing, and then working it out. Stepped into expanding my postgraduate degrees at the same time. I did a Master of Commerce and a Master of Marketing, and had a couple of children along the way. And ended up then working across into another full-service advertising agency before I stepped into the role of CEO of an agency myself, where we had an in-house digital team, quite an accomplished one, did branding, strategic communications as well. And then after about 3 or so years, I took the leap, started my own business, which I've loved doing. And all through that period of time, through the last 10 or so years, I've also been heavily involved with leadership roles on boards for the International Association of Business Communicators. So I've served on their global executive board. I've been chair of the Asia Pacific region, and I've done lots of other roles within it, from audit and risk through to leading the World Conference that was in New York last year. So lots of different roles, lots of volunteering.
No, very, very diverse. I can see that. And, so let's talk a little bit about alignment, communication, and brand strategy. My first question to you is, can you help me understand the importance of alignment in an organization and why it's critical for effective communication and branding?
Well, alignment is the key to unlocking the value in organizations through the leaders particularly, and people as well as the brands as well, and looking at the culture all in the same vein. So you've got different types of alignment. You've got strategic alignment, which is across the whole enterprise. So you've got at the top of the pyramid, if I was going to call it that, it would be, purpose. What's the organization really about? And then you have the strategy that's looking at how you're going to win to get to that purpose, and what are all the other pieces that fit behind it, the structure, the sort of processes and systems and all that sort of stuff. And it's putting all that together from an enterprise-wide level. That's at that strategic alignment piece. And then the team level alignment, which is critical, particularly starting at the executive. We need to make sure that people are not only aligned to purpose, strategy, vision and values and goals, but also with each other. And that is critical, because if you don't have the executive team aligned and then the tier below it, you're not going to get alignment across the organisation. And alignment leads to better performance in organisations. It leads to healthier cultures. It's stronger brands. It's a better bottom line completely. I think there was a study a while back by McKinsey's that looked at, I think, organisations that were more highly aligned had 20% higher net profits compared to those that aren't. And it's one of those things where alignment is not an end state. It's something that you constantly need to be working on. And the key to that is communication. So communication is like a golden thread. It's the enabler for alignment in organisations. So you need to do it really well, communication that is, to be effective at alignment, because alignment's not about everyone agreeing. It's about creating shared understanding and shared meaning. And it's about respecting the diverse perspectives that are in an organisation or in a team, and bringing that together and coming to that shared understanding of, the pathway forward, so to speak, and helping people understand what their roles are and how they connect to that. There's so many advantages to being aligned versus not being aligned.
Well said. So you also mentioned culture. So let me jump to culture. And I wanted to ask you, what role does company culture play in fostering effective communication? Because I've spoken to many, many corporate leaders. I've been in many companies where there is this concept of, we will communicate on a need-to-know basis. So my question is, what role does company culture play in fostering effective communication?
It's very important, because culture happens whether we like it or not. Culture is, it's how we behave in an organisation, things that we are prepared to accept and tolerate. I work with organisations in helping them design the cultures that they want, and looking at what are those values that are really true to who they are, that are authentic to who they are, and what are the behaviours that they will reward, and what the behaviours that they won't tolerate, that support that. And if an organisation has a culture where the values are defined as, they're defined as however, whatever the statements are, and they're up on a wall, and people don't genuinely behave or follow those values in an authentic way and in a genuine way, they're going to be found out. You will get things like a say-do gap. So if you're communicating about being an organisation that is, transparent and authentic, that's inclusive, yet your behaviours and the decisions you make don't actually reflect that, there will be issues around your reputation, because people can look into your organisation really easily. There's this thing, there's a trend that came out a number of years ago, and it's quite obvious when you think about it. It's called the glass box brands. So years ago, we used to be able to try and keep everything with an organisation, so it was like a black box. We'd only reveal the organization when we wanted to. It's almost like thinking you can control brand as well. Whereas these days, because we've got such incredible, there's this notion of radical transparency and connectivity because of digital and social, and the fact that employees do have a voice and they talk about their experiences in their ways of working, in the culture and all that sort of stuff, that comes out. So if we're not true to who we genuinely are and we communicate openly with our people and we do what we say we're going to do with our people as well as with our customers and all the other stakeholders that we have, we'll get found out. It'll damage the brand, it'll damage our reputation, it'll damage the bottom line.
Well said. And based on all the work that you do with so many different organizations, what would you say are some of the common mistakes or challenges organizations face when it comes to communication?
They assume that just because they've pushed information out that it's understood or it's even been seen. There was actually a study earlier this year by an organization out of the US called Axios. And they looked at communications, more particularly around internal communication. And they found that there was a huge misalignment between what leaders thought was being communicated or what they, the effect of that communication compared to what employees thought. It was a massive gap. And basically leaders were thinking just because they've gone and done a town hall or they've pushed out an email or they've had a conversation that the employees have heard it, care about it, and have understood it. And that's not simply just not the case. And in a lot of cases, leaders are not, and managers are not necessarily good at communication. So they need to be supported and helped and trained to be better communicators. And that's where communication professionals come into play.
Correct.
And people like myself, we go out there and we help leaders to be better communicators, to understand how to have the better conversations, to understand how to use story, how to use data, how to use insight and how to share that and how to connect the dots for people to make sure that they have understood and to make sure that they're doing their job and doing the alignment piece, because alignment's not an end state. It's something you constantly have to work on. And as I said, you need communication and you need effective communication to do it well. The Axios report actually found that in the US alone, ineffective communication costs upwards of $2 trillion a year.
Wow.
Which is massive. So it's like, why wouldn't you invest in it and why wouldn't you do better at it? But a lot of people just don't. They're too busy. They've got other priorities. They think it's a task.
Correct. Well said. So let's talk a little bit now about branding, Zora. When you talk of your clients' brands, and you gave me a very interesting example of Adidas that you worked on a few years ago, my question is, how do you keep your clients' brands relevant in today's fast-paced digital world?
Well, it is about, I think it's very important for the brands to understand what they stand for, what their positioning is, where they want to take the brand, and to then also understand how they're perceived by their customers, stakeholders, whoever their relevant audiences are. So they need to see what their current state is and where they want to take it in the future. So whether it's whatever touch point they're working on, they need to be across where they currently are and where they want to be, and then understand what are the steps that they need to take to get themselves there. Do they need to adapt? Do they need to change something? Are they measuring the right sort of things? I strongly believe that anything that's done strategically and tactically needs to be measured and evaluated in order for you to work out if it's being effective. So I think that's really critical. And that's a piece that's often missed. It's not done really well. I was running a training session yesterday with communication professionals, trying to help them understand how to be more influential and in their organizations and how to really drive value. And that always comes back to how well you understand the business. How are you understanding what the problems are? How do you connect back to that? And how do you measure what you do and how do you present that back? And it's the same with brand. I've just finished a huge strategic brand project with a client. They had never had a brand strategy before. So it was a big exercise for them. And there was confusion about what brand even is, what it's about. Is it just about changing a logo? No, it's not. What do we stand for? And going through that process was fascinating because I really engaged heavily with internal stakeholders and decision makers, employees, as well as external stakeholders, and brought all that together to help them really understand where they're at and then where could they potentially take it. And we had to look at all that macro environment. What are the things that are changing around us? So what's going to be the sensible positioning that we can have? What are those associations that we want people to really connect with our brand that we can deliver on? How are we going to talk about it? What are the brand pillars that we're going to have over the next so many years that we can turn on when we can back ourselves in those particular areas?
Correct.
So yeah.
Thank you. Great response. My next question is that given today's social media platforms, and I've spoken to so many branding experts like yourself, what role does social media play in communication and branding efforts? And how can businesses effectively leverage these platforms?
They're critical. I mean, I can say everyone's on social media. Even my mother is on social media, and she's in her 80s, which is quite funny. So lots of people are using social media, and social media, even though people don't necessarily trust social media, and there is a lot of misinformation and disinformation on social media, the brand's opportunity, it's all around positioning and getting their messages out there, and the sort of the way they do it, the tone of voice they have, the content that they're putting out there. Are they using their leaders to reflect the brand as well? So, CEOs, various executives, people in the organization are all brand ambassadors for an organization. So, getting them actively involved, giving them the mission to be able to share content that's relevant to the organization, what you believe in, what you stand for. That's why the strategic part of brand is important, and that people need to understand that. Aligning people to that, understanding what the promise is from the brand's perspective or the organizational perspective, getting them across social to be able to use that is really important. At the global conference that we're running for IABC in a few weeks, it's in June at some stage. We have an expert in social, global social media manager for a language platform, digital language platform called Duolingo. She has used TikTok exclusively to grow their following with the younger generation, so Gen Z, to take up Duolingo. So she's grown it from under 1 million followers to over 50 million in a couple of years. She's 2 years out of university. Amazing. And she's worked it out. She's worked out how to grow brand by making it relevant to the audience that you're targeting on the platform where they are. So understand your audience, understand where they play or what they use in particular from social, and make sure that you're crafting your messages to address their issues or their problems.
Fascinating. So, time for 2 more questions. My next question is about the importance of storytelling in communication and brand strategy. Help me understand what are your perspectives of the importance of storytelling, and if possible, give me an interesting example.
Ooh, I genuinely believe that storytelling is one of the most important ways to be able to connect with people, to help them understand the message that you're trying to get across. I train leaders in how to tell stories more powerfully and how to connect it to a key business message, particularly whether it's to an internal audience or an external audience. I did this work not long ago with an organization that's a global wine producer, really well known around the world, and trained their global leadership team on alignment and communication. And as part of that process, it's to make them better communicators. It's to be better storytellers, but storytellers with a purpose. So make sure you're telling a story, be really succinct in how you approach it. So, you've got you need to, set the scene, you've got your various characters, all that sort of stuff. And you'll have some sort of experience, some sort of potentially adversity or something positive happen. And then it's about tying that back to the key point that you want to make, back to the business point. So it's not just about telling any story. It's about being very intentional and purposeful with your story, and doing it in such a way where you're not giving too much detail, because you don't want to bore people. You'll see them switch off.
Correct.
And one of the people that I trained, she was sharing it. She said she used it in an all hands meeting, and she opened up with a personal story about her father, and her father had been ill. I think he had a stroke, and she was talking about dealing with that and the support, and she tied that back to a specific business, to a cultural attribute that they wanted to portray. And she did it really well. And one of the executives that was listening to her was in my training the following week. And he's like, oh, such and such did that last week. And that was amazing. He said, you could see people's faces change when she was telling the story, because they just understood it and they just got it. And she just connected. And I'm not sure where the statistic comes from, but they say that sharing a story is 22 times more effective than just sharing a fact.
Correct.
People will remember it more.
Well said. Absolutely. I agree with you completely. And my last question to you now, Zora, and this is for the thousands of people who will listen to our conversation. Based on your amazing understanding of communication, strategy, and alignment, what would you say are 3 lessons you would want a lot of our viewers and listeners to take away from your journey and from our conversation?
I would say that, so with alignment, it's emergent. It's not a end state. You have to keep working at it. And it takes constant effort. But that effort far outweighs leaving the status quo of misalignment.
Correct.
Communication done well is the enabler of alignment, connection, and also experiences. And, employee experience, customer experience, brand experience, all of the experiences.
Yeah.
And when thinking about brand, do take the time to develop the strategy, to review your strategy before you jump on board to do the visual rebrand or the branding exercise. So consider how to connect all the various dots, the business purpose, the vision, the values, the culture, and that holistic view of experience. How does it all fit together? And you'll be in a much better position.
Fabulous. And on that note, Zora, and your 3 amazing lessons on alignment, keep working at it. Then it takes a lot of effort. Second, you said on communication, it is the alignment of enabler of alignment and experience. And the third one, you said on branding, develop and review strategy constantly. Thank you so much for speaking to me about your journey. Thank you for speaking to me about alignment, communication, and branding. I learned several new things from you on on different aspects of communication and different aspects of branding. Thank you for speaking to me, and good luck.
Thank you so very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.